Breaking news that is currently sending shockwaves through every diplomatic office from Ottawa to Beijing. What we just witnessed in Caracas isn't just a regime change, it is the official birth of a new world disorder. Just hours ago, under the direct orders of Donald Trump, an elite unit of the U.S. military executed a brazen extraction of Nicolás Maduro, decapitating the Venezuelan leadership and ending a decade-long standoff in a single night of violence. But if you think this is just about a dictator in South America, you are missing the forest for the trees. In the next 30 minutes, we are going to pull back the curtain on a terrifying new geopolitical strategy called the Donroe Doctrine. We will reveal why this illegal extraction is actually a direct threat to Canadian sovereignty, how the world's largest oil reserves are being forcibly integrated into a new American empire, and why experts like Andrew Nikiforuk are warning that international law is officially dead. The question isn't what happens to Venezuela next. The question is, who is next on the list? Because in this new age of tyrants, being an ally no longer guarantees your safety. Let's break it down. The year 2026 has begun with a bang that effectively ended the liberal democratic order we've known since World War II. Donald Trump, acting as an impetuous imperialist, has declared that he will now run Venezuela. This is a country that once fed itself, but now imports 80% of its food, a petrostate in ruins that has seen 7 million people flee its borders. But Trump isn't interested in the people. He is interested in the 300 billion barrels of proven oil reserves sitting beneath the Orinoco Belt. This is the reassertion of the Donroe Doctrine, but with a brutal Trumpian twist. For the first time in history, the United States is openly behaving like a mafia state, mirroring the tactics of Vladimir Putin. By kidnapping Maduro and killing his security detail, Washington has sent a clear message to the Western Hemisphere: bow, scrape, and comply, or you will be removed. For Canada, this should be a moment of absolute terror. We have long relied on the special relationship and the protection of international law. But as of today, those protections have evaporated. Sovereignty is now up for grabs. If the United States is willing to invade a sovereign nation in its backyard to secure energy resources, what makes us think our 163 billion barrels of oil in Alberta are safe? We are the world's fourth largest oil producer, and we share the longest undefended border with a superpower that has just declared itself the energy dominatrix of the world. The Donroe Doctrine is built on two pillars of ego and hubris. First, the U.S. will expand fossil fuel production at full speed to project global power. Second, it will forcefully deny any non-hemispheric competitors, specifically China and Russia, access to strategically vital assets in this hemisphere. China, which lent $100 billion to Maduro in exchange for crude, is now watching its investment vanish. Russia, which used Venezuela as a strategic outpost, has been sidelined. The jungle has no rules, and the American eagle has just sharpened its claws. The extraction of Maduro is not an isolated event. It is the opening move in a global game of energy consolidation. To understand why Canada is now in the crosshairs, you have to understand the chemistry of oil. Venezuela and Canada share a unique and now dangerous commonality. Both nations possess massive reserves of heavy crude oil. For decades, the Gulf Coast refineries in Texas and Louisiana were specifically designed to process this thick, sulfurous black gold from both Alberta and the Orinoco Belt. By seizing control of Venezuela, Washington has effectively cornered the global market on heavy oil. The Eurasia Group and leading analysts are now pointing to a terrifying reality. Trump's Donroe Doctrine creates a monopoly on energy that leaves Canada with zero leverage. If the U.S. can dictate the flow and price of Venezuelan oil, it can and will dictate the terms for Canada's energy exports. We are talking about a petro-political siege. If Ottawa refuses to comply with Washington's demands on trade, the Trump administration can simply flood the market with seized Venezuelan crude, crashing the price of Western Canadian Select and bankrupting the province of Alberta overnight. This is the energy dominatrix strategy. It's about more than just profit. It's about total behavioral control. In this new world disorder, Canada's oil sands are no longer a strategic asset. They are a target for annexation. The Thais analysis is blunt. After Venezuela, the goal is permanent energy security for the American empire. And that security requires the United States to have a kill switch over the 3.8 million barrels of oil that Canada sends south every single day. Think about the implications for Canadian sovereignty. For 50 years, Canada has operated under the illusion that it is a middle power with its own foreign policy. But as Donald Trump moves to run Venezuela, he is signaling that the era of polite diplomacy is over. In his view, Canada, Greenland, and the Caribbean are not independent nations. They are provinces of a greater American resource zone. The kidnapping of a head of state in Caracas is a demonstration of power meant for the eyes of Mark Carney and the leadership in Ottawa. It says, "Look at what we do to those who resist." Let's look at the financial hemorrhaging that is already beginning as the markets realize that the U.S. is moving toward a forced integration of North American energy. The Canadian dollar is being hammered by uncertainty. Investors are asking, why put money into Calgary when the rules can be changed by a Truth Social post at 3 a.m.? We are seeing the beginning of a massive capital flight. Real money is leaving Canada and moving into U.S. energy stocks that will benefit from this new imperial monopoly. Furthermore, the environmental fallout of this Donroe Doctrine is catastrophic. By abandoning international climate commitments and doubling down on the world's dirtiest oil in Venezuela and Canada, the U.S. is effectively declaring war on the planet's future. It is a scorched earth policy designed to maximize short-term dominance at the cost of long-term survival. The world is being divided into spheres of influence where the only law is the law of the jungle. Russia has claimed its sphere in Eastern Europe. China is cementing its grip on the South China Sea, and now the United States has officially claimed the entire Western Hemisphere as its private resource colony. George Conway's analysis of this shift is chilling. He argues that by destroying the international rules-based order, Trump has created a vacuum that will be filled by chaos. When you treat your neighbors like property, Conway warns, you don't build a stable empire, you build a powder keg. Canada is now sitting on that powder keg. We are watching the end of the special relationship and the beginning of a period of vassalage. The question is no longer whether Canada can influence Washington. The question is whether Canada can even say no without facing an extraction of its own. This is no longer a localized conflict in South America. It is the first major fracture in a global system that has held for 8 decades. The extraction of Maduro on January 3rd, 2026, has sent a clear signal to every capital on Earth. The rules-based international order is officially dead. In its place, we have the Donroe Doctrine, a power-based hierarchy where the only law is the reach of a superpower's military and economic might. For the average Canadian, this shift is already showing up in their bank accounts. As the market reacts to the prospect of a U.S.-controlled Venezuelan oil monopoly, the Canadian dollar is facing an unprecedented sovereignty discount. Investors are fleeing Canadian assets, fearing that Ottawa's energy sector, the backbone of the national economy, will be relegated to a secondary, subservient role. We are looking at a potential 15% drop in the loonie by the end of the quarter. This is the price of being a petro-neighbor to an imperialist energy dominatrix. But the ripple effects extend far beyond North America. In Beijing, the mood is one of quiet fury. China has invested over $100 billion into Venezuela over the last 2 decades. Now, in a single night, that investment has been effectively confiscated by Washington. This sets a dangerous precedent for the South China Sea and Taiwan. If the U.S. can unilaterally ignore international norms to secure its sphere of influence in the Western Hemisphere, why should China or Russia abide by those same norms in their own backyards? We are witnessing the geopolitical balkanization of the world. Global trade is fracturing into regional blocs, and Canada is trapped inside a bloc where it has no voting rights. The 2026 USMA review is no longer a negotiation, it is an ultimatum. Washington is now in a position to demand total alignment on everything from Arctic defense to digital censorship. using the threat of energy strangulation as its primary weapon. Let's talk about the human cost of this New World disorder. As Andrew Nikiforuk pointed out, the conquest of human sovereignty by fossil fuel interests is accelerating. We are seeing a return to the Banana Republic era, but with 21st century technology. The extraction of a head of state through a precision military operation, followed by the immediate arrival of Western oil executives to fix the industry, is a scene straight out of a 19th century colonial playbook. If this trend continues, the concept of a middle power like Canada is obsolete. You are either a superpower or you are a resource colony. There is no middle ground. The Thais analysis reminds us that when energy security becomes the primary driver of foreign policy, human rights, environmental standards, and democratic norms are the first casualties. So, what is the call to action? For the citizens of Canada and the remaining democracies of the world, the time for polite concern is over. We must demand a total reassessment of our national security and economic independence. We cannot remain 75% dependent on a customer that is currently kidnapping world leaders to secure its trade advantages. We need a radical pivot toward internal resilience and diversified global partnerships before the Donroe Doctrine turns its full attention toward the 49th parallel. The era of certainty is gone. The era of the tyrant is here. Subscribe to this channel and hit the notification bell because we are the only ones tracking the data the mainstream media is too afraid to touch. We will be here every week breaking down the collapse of the old world and the birth of the new disorder. I'm your channel name, and this is the end of the line for sovereignty as we knew it. What side of history will you be on when the eagle finally decides to land in Ottawa? When you govern through bombast rather than strategy, when you make decisions without understanding their consequences, you eventually face a moment where your bluff gets called. Mark Carney just called that bluff with one devastating word, and the fallout will define American trade policy for years to come. Every piece of aluminum that goes into an aircraft must be traceable to its production facility, must meet exact chemical composition specifications, and must come from approved suppliers. The certification process to approve a new supplier can take 12 to 18 months and costs millions of dollars. So when Canada suddenly becomes unavailable due to tariffs and retaliatory measures, American manufacturers can't just order from Chinese or Russian suppliers instead. They're locked into specific supply chains by regulatory requirements, technical specifications, and quality assurance protocols. Canada accounted for approximately 2.9 million metric tons of primary aluminum production annually, making it the fourth largest producer globally after China, India, and Russia. But here's what matters. Canadian aluminum is primarily produced using clean hydroelectric power, giving it a carbon footprint of approximately 4 tons of CO2 per ton of aluminum compared to a global average of 16.9 tons. For manufacturers facing increasing environmental regulations and corporate sustainability commitments, Canadian aluminum isn't just convenient, it's strategically essential. When the Trump administration announced a 25% tariff on Canadian aluminum imports, the immediate effect was to increase the landed cost of Canadian aluminum in the United States by exactly that amount. Think of it like this. If a metric ton of Canadian aerospace-grade aluminum previously cost $2,800 delivered to a Boeing facility in South Carolina, the tariff adds $700, bringing the total to $3,500. This is the financial reality that Washington ignored, and now the entire industrial heartland is paying the price for a revolution that lacks a map.